What's up everyone, Thrall's Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic and I have another collection update for you. Got a whole bunch of stuff in the mail, hit up some record stores, and still trying to patch up holes in the collection in terms of like classic stuff. So I'm gonna get a nice little mix of stuff in here. Some of it is a little bit off the metal reservation, but you know, I listen to all sorts of different stuff and I kind of want to include it. So let's just get into it. Visceral Mass, self-titled EP. This is, I guess, kind of a joint release between Maggot Stomp and Severed Records. This is a two-man death metal act from LA, and it's already kind of odd because it is listed as on hold after pretty much just this release. I think they've only been around for 1 or 2 years. The drummer in this band is actually also the drummer of Galvanizer, which is another cool Maggot Stomp band. If you haven't checked out that band, check out a lot of Maggot Stomp stuff. They have a lot of great old school death metal. This is just really raw, groovy, almost kind of brutal death in spots, but mostly it just sticks to that old school vibe, like lurking somewhere between like autopsy and suffocation. Like it has kind of the mix of those two, but it's really solid. The mix can be a little rough at times, but overall I really liked what I heard in here, and I kind of hope these guys get back together or get off of hiatus or whatever's going on there, because I'd like to hear a full length from this, because this was really solid. Definitely check it out. Night Demon, Curse of the Damned. This was their debut full length, came out on Steamhammer in 2015, and I got their most recent one. I decided to go back and get this one. This one is a little bit more raw, a little bit more heavy. Definitely some more thrash nods on here. Plenty of 80s metal cheese though, especially, God, what was it? Heavy Metal Heat. It's really cheesy when you listen to the lyrics, and I mean the vocals are really out in front, so you're gonna hear them. But it's fun, and I think the melodies are strong on here. The riffs are really good. A lot of fun D-beat gallops, lots of nods to, you know, early Iron Maiden, some Scorpions here and there, Angel Witch, stuff like that. Really solid stuff. These guys have been like steadily releasing singles here lately, and I've really liked what I've heard. So I'm kind of wondering if there is another album in the works. I'd like to hear it because I've enjoyed both albums I've got. I like the production on this one a little bit better just because I think it's a little bit more raw. I think the guitars are a little bit crunchier on here. But I like pretty much everything I've heard so far, even with the heavy amounts of just cheese drizzled all over it. It's still really good. It's still fun to listen to. Definitely check it out. It's a fun band. Ihsahn Pharos EP. I love Ihsahn. This guy is just kind of a prog genius out of nowhere. I didn't really expect it until I started hearing his solo work, and he is doing some really creative things. This one is definitely different. This is a lot different than the Telemark EP that came out, which I thought was good. This, I think, is wildly different in terms of just the overall feel of it. This is not super heavy. It's very dark though. Like parts on here remind me of like a really dark, somber ELO. Maybe even some Radiohead nods, Tool, lots of atmosphere. I think entirely clean vocals. There's not a single dry scream on here if I remember right. And they even do a cover of Aha, and it's not Take On Me, and I kind of appreciate that because everyone has covered the shit out of that and struggled with those high notes. I mean, those are really tough. But they actually covered Manhattan Skyline, and just to make sure they could hit the high notes, they got the singer from Leprous, which apparently he can hit any note. His vocals are absolutely insane. I mean, I've seen him live twice, and I'm still pretty much awestruck in terms of the stuff he's done. Really solid EP. I look forward to pretty much anything Ihsahn does. I have all of his studio albums now. I got both the EPs that came out this year. This is my favorite of the two for sure. I just thoroughly enjoyed this. It's a very immersive listen, and the videos for this are really cool too because you can actually see like a time lapse of this painting being done on here, and it's just really cool how they did that. Check it out. It's awesome. Lord Matzigkeitus, Drown. I think that's how you pronounce that word. This one I got some conflicting info on. Looking this up, I got either a band from Canada, which I think this is probably the guy from Canada, but I also got a band from Korea. So, I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell. I just saw some pictures. He's wearing corpse paint. Really can't tell if he's Canadian or Korean. Either way, this is a one-man black metal project, and I'm really not a fan. It's just really kind of nuts sounding. Like, it's a series of non-linear thoughts, or non-linear music rather. It's just kind of comes out of nowhere with different parts. The transitions are just odd. There's a lot of wolves howling on here and just vocal fits. None of the music gels. There's really not a lot of hooks on here, nothing to really draw me in personally. It's just sort of chaotic and noisy and odd. I really wish I had more to say about this, because I really tried to get into this, like, okay, there's something to this, but I couldn't find really anything. I was mostly just put off by the songwriting style, the production. It's not really great, but I mean, if you get into it, by all means get into it. I'll definitely leave links to all the music down here in the description down below. It's not for me, I know that much, and if you dig it, dig it. But yeah, I'm probably not gonna listen to this again unless I absolutely have to. So yeah, check it out. May not be for me, could be for you. Oceans of Slumber, self-titled. Now this is a band I've been hearing about. I've heard a couple of other tracks from previous albums. I was like, it's all right. And then I heard some tracks off of this album. I was like, whoa, that's really good. And I decided to pick this up, and this is an awesome album. This is like really dreary, depressive prog metal, I guess. I guess you could say prog metal, because it mixes in a lot of elements. Like, you have atmospheric death metal, very much akin to like Rivers of Nile, Black Crown Initiate. You have very progressive metal, like earlier Opeth, or at least before they went full prog rock. And then you also have a lot of like synthwave stuff on here. The vocals on here are absolutely killer. And I love her singing voice. She has a really solid range, very emotive. And when you look at some of the lyrics, these definitely scream very personal, and she definitely emotes that well. And this sounds amazing because it was mixed by Dan Swano, who is just excellent at pretty much anything music, I guess. He rarely misses. I particularly loved To the Sea, A Tolling of Bells. I thought that that was an absolutely beautiful song. A little bit less heavy than a lot of the stuff, because out of nowhere in here can come some just brutal death metal, just blast beats and chugs and such. Like, parts even remind me of Immolation. So hearing that shift in terms of different styles in here, really good, pretty progressive. Definitely check this band out. Check out this release. I don't know much about their other releases. This is my first experience with them, but I would say definitely check this one out because it is excellent. Voracious Scourge, In Death. This is Mike Smith's new band, formerly of Suffocation, blast beat master, you know, just the guy. And this also features the frontman from Sinister on vocals. So pretty much what you get is kind of Suffocation. Like, it's really hard not to compare this to Suffocation because it really sounds like it. I would say maybe the only difference is it might be a touch more thrashy. A lot of my issues though is it's not particularly exciting. Like, there's some really solid tracks on here that I dug, and I really dug the EP that came before this, but a lot of it kind of just blends in. I think one of the standout moments on here was they actually sampled the whole Bring Out Your Dead moment from Monty Python's Holy Grail, which I absolutely love that movie. I've watched it like a dozen times. It's an interesting sample to put in a brutal, you know, death metal album, but I thought it was great. I think it gets stronger as it goes on, but when it came down to the production again, the thing that I was kind of surprised by was the drums are kind of thin on this. I think they definitely sounded stronger on the EP, and they definitely sounded stronger on Suffocation albums, and I don't think it has anything to do with Mike Smith's playing ability. He's killing on here. I just think they kind of mixed it a little thin. Like, it doesn't have the giant impact it should. Still, you know, it's a pretty decent release, and I'll definitely keep checking out stuff with this because it's cool hearing Mike Smith back on drums. So yeah, definitely check it out. Judas Priest, Painkiller. Came out in 1990. I really don't think I need to say much about this one. Still rounding out all the Judas Priest that I don't own, and yeah, I didn't own this one. I was relying on my whole Metalworks giant collection for a long time. Like, you know, it's just time to actually get this one. And it's awesome. Of course, I've already listened to it like a dozen times. Like, I should get that, and then I didn't. But got it now. Between the Hammer and the Anvil, absolutely killer song. I love Nightcrawler. It's one of my favorite songs on here. Of course, who doesn't love the drum intro on Painkiller? It's a ripping song. Again, I don't think I need to say much about this. It's a classic. Most metalheads own it. Most metalheads have listened to it at least. It's, you know, one of Judas Priest's best albums. Not gonna say where I'd rank it because we'll eventually probably get to Judas Priest, but yeah, if you don't own this, pick it up, of course, because it's Judas Priest. It's a classic. All right, we got the split EP from Voidrot and Atavisma. Now, Atavisma I really wasn't familiar with. They are a French death doom band, and they're pretty solid. Actually, kind of complements Voidrot in a way, because they're also death doom. They have some really cool drum work on here, like very jazzy, like those kind of jazzy fills and such. And some of the odd riffs they throw in there really reminded me a lot of Demolich, which very few bands remind me of Demolich just because Demolich is Demolich. But there's also a lot of that cool incantation atmosphere that definitely carries over to the Voidrot side of this, which we reviewed the new Voidrot not too long ago, and I thought it was decent. This, I think, is stronger material on this split. I think it's a little bit more riffy, it stands out more. I think the mix is less about atmosphere and more about building riffs and such. You don't lose any atmosphere, it's just more focused on like big driving songs with a distinguishable riff and such, and I think it was solid. Like, this is actually what got me into Voidrot when I first heard it, because I've been jamming this on YouTube for a while. Solid release. I definitely recommend this split. Both the bands on here are really good, and while they have a similar sound, they definitely have a sound that is distinguishable between the two, which is awesome to hear in a split. Definitely check this out. Galvanizer, Sanguine, Vigil. This came out in 2018 on Everlasting Spew, much like the Voidrot split. This is a Finnish death grind band, and they will whoop your ass in terms of their sound. It is heavy, old school grind. It kind of reminded me a lot of Caustic Wound in terms of their sound, which that's still probably my favorite grind release this year. This is just nasty. These guys are also playing at MDF, I believe, and I definitely want to see them now. Great groovy sections, but tons of that grindcore energy, blast beats. It is just furious. There is a downside though. When I put this in my car and I have, you know, speakers in the back, you know, with the bass up because I like hearing that stampede of double bass. Couldn't really hear it because the bass is so up in the mix in terms of being really forward. It is so heavy, it kind of drowns out everything, which sucks because these songs are killer. There's no weak points on this. This album just plows through and just whoops your ass. So hopefully their next album is mixed a little bit better with, you know, that bass just slightly down a bit, because I like a nice full sound, but it's really, really, really prominent on here, and it's kind of too much. This is a killer album though. Don't have the bass up when you jam it, but listen to it because it is absolutely kick-ass. Definitely check this out. Lord Gore, Scalpels for Blind Surgeons. This came out in 2019 on Everlasting Spew. In case you hadn't noticed, I got a package from Everlasting Spew not too long ago. Thank you, Tito. This is kind of a supergroup. It features current and former members of Blood Freak, Torture Rack, Skeletal Remains, and Ritual Necromancy. These guys pretty much start off as more death grind. This is definitely a more death metal release, but there are still hints of that old grind sound. And looking at their earlier album covers, this is the only one I could probably put up on here in terms of art, because other ones were a little too sexual-ish. It's weird. Look them up. This is pretty solid old school death metal. It is not too far removed from Blood Freak, and I've been listening to a lot of Blood Freak, so yeah, that sound definitely sticks with me. The vocals are low and gurgled. It's kind of murky production. It's definitely all gore related, horror movie samples peppered in there too. Solid release. I really dug this. I think it's kind of done with being fun in mind. Like, this isn't just supposed to be like this was high art. Like, no, this is a lot of, you know, gore drenched death metal ridiculousness, lots of cool like exhumed like moments. Just have fun with it, and that's what I really liked about this. Pretty solid release. I'll definitely check out more by this band, and if I get some other releases, expect some censored covers, because yeah, look them up. Anyway, yeah, you'll know. Check it out. Vulture. Vulture's Beak. This is their original EP that came out on Bartham Records, and I've covered Vulture before. I've actually got their 2 other releases, and I think they're really, really good. This is a little bit more raw. Actually, All the songs on here appear in their first album, which is absolutely awesome. It's Entangled in the Webs of Fear, which is the opening track on here. And listening to the same tracks on that album versus this is definitely different. The guitar tone on the full length is much crunchier. It kind of snarls. This is kind of that more sludgy, muddy sound. And I don't know which I like more, because I like both. They really have two different sounds for the same songs. And generally when it comes down to like an EP versus the full length in terms of like the production, you get like little contrast. This one is a pretty major contrast. All the songs on here are killer, mainly because I've jammed them before on the full length. It's just the fact that they sound a little bit different, and I think, I don't know, like I might like the muddier production a little bit more. Either way, you're gonna get heavy, awesome, old school death metal. These guys are also tied in with Ectoplasma, which is another great old school death metal band from Greece. Like, they just embody that early 90s death metal sound as well. Definitely check this out. Check out all of Vulture's releases, which I think are only 2 other ones. Check them all out. Listen to them in a day. They're really good. Check this out though. Rotted, Pestilent Tomb. Now this originally came out in 2018, but this is the 2020 reissue from Maggot Stomp Records. And this is a one-man death metal band from Illinois, or at least it's one man in the studio. I believe he has other members in here as well. You can definitely tell it's one man because I believe that is a drum machine. It doesn't sound like real drums on here. This is slow, sludgy, old school death metal. It really doesn't scream death doom. There are a couple of parts on here that do, but for the most part it just has that old school like obituary and autopsy sort of feel. Like, it gets upbeat, but it's mostly like a D beat, and it is just murky and nasty sounding. One issue though I have with the vocals, they get really monotone after a while. Like, you kind of get tired of the same tone that he's actually doing. It could use a little bit of variety in terms of like some highs or lows, just like a change here and there, because it gets really monotone after a while. All in all though, I would definitely get more by this band, or rather this guy. It's solid old school death metal. It's murky. It sounds like it was recorded inside of a mausoleum, which, you know, that's cool. You want that sort of sound for old school death metal. Solid stuff. Definitely check it out. Castigate, Bring Me the Head of Jesus Christ. Or just Bring Me the Head of, but it's actually Bring Me the Head of Jesus Christ. This is a German death metal band / death grind band, and this is their lone studio release, I believe, or at least lone studio full length. This came out in 1999 on Pavement Music, and the death grind's kind of there. I heard a lot of brutal death metal. Like, it really sounds a lot like Dying Fetus in spots, definitely some deicide moments because it can get kind of thrashy. Drums are fiercely clicky. Kind of drove me nuts on that. I don't like that sort of production. They kind of need like a full, like, you know, hit. It just sounds very clicky, and that kind of drives me nuts. Guitars, thick, chunky, you know, very much in the realm of Dying Fetus once again. Some cool vocal trade-offs, kind of remind me of stuff you'd hear in Exhumed or Impaled. An issue I had with this album though is listening to it, it was kind of hard to tell when one song broke in another, because the spaces between 2 tracks seemed extra small. Like, it would just blaze on through. There's really not a lot of pretense or like an intro a little bit. It just kept going, like exploding each song, which kind of like hampered the flow of the album, I guess you could say, because again, I couldn't tell when a track would change. So that kind of took me out of it. There are some spots in here that are maybe a little blackened, which were kind of cool. All in all, this is an interesting release, and kind of wondered what happened to this band. Didn't really come out at a time where death metal was super popular. I mean, you know, the 90s, at least the late 90s, was kind of a struggle for death metal, and, well, I mean, a lot of things that weren't nu metal. So yeah, not the best time, but still pretty solid death metal. Definitely recommend checking it out. It's pretty damn brutal. So yeah, check it out. Lard, The Last Temptation of Reid. This is an odd side project from Jello Biafra, from Dead Kennedys, Al Jorgensen and Paul Barker from Ministry, and it is industrial, hardcore, punk, metal. It's weird, but it is fun. Right away, I love the song Fork Boy. It is just this fun industrial stomp with Jello's wild vocals and his rants about everything. The song Can God Fill Teeth is particularly hilarious. You just have to listen to these songs to really just get them. Like, You get a lot of meetings of all their worlds on there. There are definitely songs that are far more like Dead Kennedys, but just with industrial drums in here. There are definitely some songs in here that feel like they could have been on a Ministry album. It's an awesome project. I really enjoyed this. There's a lot of cool, like, weird post-punk moments, like Killing Joke. Fun listen. They did a very, very long cover of They're Coming to Take Me Away. I think it's like 8 minutes or something like that. Seems longer than it should be, but it's a lot of fun. I was pretty much hooked on this. I had heard about this band for years, never really picked them up. I think they have one other release, and I'm gonna have to find them because if it's as good as this, I want it. Fun stuff, definitely check it out. It's weird, but yeah, check it out. You just gotta listen to it. Unsane Blood Run. This came out in 2005 on Relapse Records, and Unsane, long-standing noise rock band from New York. I got in these guys not too long after I started like really getting into Helmet, and been slowly sort of collecting all their stuff. I like the fact that their sound is a different approach to heavy. It's very dissonant, but there's still a lot of rock riffs, a lot of hardcore influence in here, and I just really dug their overall sound. Still meaning to get into like bands like Swans. I just haven't got around to picking up any. And I did pick up Human Impact, which actually features the main guy on here. I believe it was their guitarist or bassist. I can't remember which one was the front end. Shit, that's my bad. Either way, he's in Human Impact now since Unsane is defunct. And I don't know, I mean, there's a chance they could come back, who knows, but he seems like he's pretty happy doing Human Impact right now. But yeah, I've slowly been trying to pick up all the releases I'm missing. I think there's still a lot I'm missing, but that just gives me more to hunt down later. Anyway, not really metal per se, but heavy. Definitely heavy and definitely noisy as hell. If you've never jammed Unsane, this isn't a terrible place to start, but honestly, I would get some of the earlier stuff first, but this, still really good. It's Unsane. They rolled. Check them out. Excessive Force, Gentle Death. I kind of just picked this up on a whim just because I'm still a big KMFDM fan, especially their older stuff. This was Sasha Konietzko working with a whole bunch of different people, you know, doing sort of a KMFDM thing. It's still very dancey, but still heavy. Like there's still big like rock and metal riffs in it. This came out in 1993 on Wax Trax, and this would be right around the same time that Angst came out, which Angst is probably my favorite KMFDM album. It definitely was a huge one for industrial metal for me. Doesn't sound anything like that. This is way more dancey. I think the fact that he had members of My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult in here, they kind of made it a little bit more accessible. It was not like the more metal sound that was on Angst. Still got some good riffs in here, and Ash, you know, throws in some killer riffs on here. But this was, I don't know, kind of just a filler project. I think they had one other release. I haven't jammed that one. This, you know, not terribly necessary if you own a lot of KMFDM because there really isn't anything different. It's different than My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, but not different than KMFDM. So, yeah, I mean, if you want it, if you're a completionist, you want all that stuff, get it. But overall, it's not terribly necessary, but still kind of fun. Check it out. Silvertomb, Edge of Existence. This came out last year on Long Branch Records, and this is Kenny Hickey's new project, formerly of Typo Negative. Been jamming a lot of Typo here lately. Can't wait to do that ranking. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Anyway, this is pretty much his continuation from Seventh Void, which was kind of a short-lived band that he also had with Jenny Kelly, who's also on here too, as well as a former member of Agnostic Front. This is kind of a continuation of Seventh Void. It's definitely doom metal, hard rock, sludge metal, like it's kind of a mix of all those things. Pretty solid riffs on here. Kenny, I think, pushes himself pretty hard vocally in here, but I think he's pushing himself to almost sound more like Chris Cornell. Kenny's vocals were always more peppered in on Typo releases. It was mostly Pete doing it, but he was very effective when he came in. This, I think him taking the lead on here, he just really kind of pushes too much for that Chris Cornell sound, and it sounds like he really just pushes himself out of his range a little bit. There's some stuff in here that did remind me of Monster Magnet, and I do love Monster Magnet, but overall this was just kind of okay. It felt like Seventh Void, really. Like there's really not a tremendous amount of difference other than the name, which I guess he got by rearranging some of the letters in Symptom of the Universe by Black Sabbath, which is kind of a fun note. But overall, it's a pretty decent release. I kind of wonder why it's not Seventh Void. Is there like some legal reason why Seventh Void isn't around, or did he just decide to change the name because it's very similar to that? But either way, pretty solid release. Definitely check it out. Hecate Enthroned, Virulent Rapture. This actually came out in 2013, though this is the 2020 reissue on M30 Records. And I picked this up on a whim. I'd heard of the band. I'd never actually jammed their stuff, so this was an impulse buy. And it's blackened death metal with a lot of keyboards. And I'm really finicky about keyboards and how they're used and all the synths. This is more of that symphonic blackened death metal sound. They are very out in front, and they kind of take away from the songs, because the songs overall aren't too bad. I think the vocal trade-offs in terms of the highs and the lows kind of remind me more of like a deathcore sort of vocal style rather than blackened death metal. And this is a very polished album too, or at least it's very compressed, and there's not a lot of grit on here, like, and it kind of needs it. The drums drove me nuts in there, especially in terms of like the levels on different cymbals. Like, there's a cymbal on here that seems like it's louder than everything else when it's going. Like, it's almost louder than the actual drums. But the main detractor for me were the keys, just because I didn't feel like they added too much. For as much as they're used, there's only moments where they seem super effective. The rest of the time was like you just had to squeeze in a keyboard part because you had a keyboardist. I don't know. But I mean, that's just me. I'm not a huge keyboard person or synth person when it comes down to like symphonic stuff. But if you do dig that sort of sound, definitely check this out. And finally, we have the new album from Morta Skuld, Suffer for Nothing. This came out this year on Peaceful Records, and this is an absolute banger. I love it. I was not a huge fan of the last Morta Skuld album, actually the last two. Either way, I love their first two albums. Their first two albums are underground death metal gems, Dying Remains, especially their debut. This is one of the best albums they have put out since those two albums. This is aggressive, raw. Listening to their previous album compared to this, it's like two different animals. The production on here is just gritty as hell. The guitar tone is just thick and chunky. The drums sound heavier than hell. I absolutely love this. Like, pretty much every second of this was just riff after riff of just great old school death metal. I am going to jam the shit out of this because this was just instant hooks. If you love old school death metal, it's a good chance you might know who this is. But if you've never heard of Morta Skuld, definitely check out the first two albums for sure. I mean, check out all their stuff, of course, but those first two albums, and then get this one because it's awesome. I love pretty much every second of it. Check it out. All right, and now I said another collection update, or rather big collection update. I'm probably gonna start whittling these down because these are really long videos. Unless you guys like long videos, and then I'll just wait a little bit longer, because I'm definitely gonna keep collecting stuff because there's a lot of cool stuff out there. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. I will catch you later.